Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Basic Steps to Starting a Business webinar. My name is Christopher Garcia and I'm the Business Development Specialist at the SBDC at UNM Valencia campus. We created this webinar off of a great document on our website called The Basic Steps to Starting a Business. Who would have thought, right? And my contact information is on the slide, and a PDF of the slides will be emailed to you following the presentation. In fact, I like to make sure everybody has that follow-up email even before I mail it out. So I'm going to share that with you. And you should be seeing that the email that you'll receive as a follow-up email. Make it bigger. And then I like to view it as a web page, and I like to chat over this link to everybody on the call so you could access it via the link. Make sure I'm chatting it out to everyone. And you should be able to access this follow-up document with the slideshow and all the resources we're going to talk about today. Let me do my new share. Okay, before we begin, let's all go over some webinar ground rules. Everybody on the call right now is muted, so don't worry about background noise. Only I have to worry about that. There's a feature to raise your hand, and I've already used it, but I'll use it throughout the webinar just to make sure we're on the same page, literally and figuratively. Everyone who could hear me and see the slides, you've raised your hand for me. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. The Q&A feature is monitored, so if you watch the recording, it will prompt you when the question was answered. And just to make sure that everybody knows how to use the Q&A, would you please type a hi, hello, how are you into the Q&A for me? Hi, Phil. Hi, Heather. Hi, Patricia. Hi, Catherine says hi to everyone. Crystal says good morning. Thank you. Good morning. Hello, Brett. And hello, Chelsea. Hello, hi, Tommy. Hi, Alexandra. Thank you, guys. I'm glad that chat works. I don't have any worries about today's group. I think you're all very Zoom savvy. If there's a problem going on, like you can't hear or see, I see some people put hi, hello in the chat. Hi, Michael. Hello, Rose. And hi, Heather. I prefer you ask the questions in the Q&A, but you're welcome to chat with me. I like to reserve the chat for like if something's going wrong, like Chris, you're on the wrong page or something like that, you could chat that over to me. Oh, no problem, Michael, and hi. And he says hello to everyone. So we know that's working. I have page numbers at the bottom of each slide. So if you want to revisit a page, you just let me know the page number. And again, the presentation will be emailed to you. Here's a graphic of our center locations throughout New Mexico. And the mission of the SBDC is to build skilled entrepreneurs and strong businesses by offering low or no cost webinars like this one and confidential business consulting. I'm going to tell you more about the SBDC in the next few slides. But before I move on, I want you to notice the disclaimer at the bottom of the slide. It says powered by the SBA. We are a program sponsored by the Small Business Administration. They're one of our funders along with the state of New Mexico. You paid for this program with your tax dollars, so please take advantage of it. And we aren't the SBA. The SBA does do loan guarantees, and I will talk about those at the end of the presentation. But don't confuse us with the SBA. We are a separate arm of them. This slide includes 3 topics for upcoming trainings, the basic steps, of course, QuickBooks Online. I think the next one I'm going to do is June, and cybersecurity. Our PTech program usually offers that, and we usually have a 6-part series. But please visit our website at www.nmsbdc.org to register as a client or register for a training. And everybody on the call today should have registered as a client already. And I see some people join. I was just before we got into the webinar, I chatted over to everyone the link to the follow-up email. I'm going to chat that over again. If you're having trouble opening that link or it's not going to the correct place, please let me know in the chat. Perfect. So here's the agenda for today's training. I'm going to tell you more about the SBDC, talk to you about our pre and post surveys for the training, get into the basic steps, and review and demonstrate our excellent research tools, and then I'll take questions. I always like to ask everybody on the call today where they're joining us from. So if you're joining us from Central New Mexico, would you raise your hand for me? So we're in Albuquerque metro area. Okay, we don't have that many today from the metro area. Well, thank you for joining us. How about Southeast? So how about Southeast New Mexico? So we're talking about the Lovington, Hobbs, Loving area. Oh, well, thanks for joining us all the way from down south, Patricia. Perfect. How about Southwest? So maybe Silver City, the Boot Heel. Oh, thanks for joining us, Catherine, all the way from the Southwest. How about the Northeast? So let's see, Northeast would be Clayton, Tucumcari. Wow, thank you for joining us. We almost have all of New Mexico represented. Let's see, how about Northwest, Farmington, Farmington area. Wow, I think this is the first webinar in a while I've had everybody, or all of New Mexico represented in the webinar. So thank you all for joining me today. Perfect. So now let's go into the services of the SBDC. We offer, again, two major services: confidential business consulting and low or no cost business trainings. There are no limits to how much no cost counseling you can receive. And we have centers throughout New Mexico, so there'll be one close to you. And if you look at the graphic in the upper right-hand corner, it shows what we do: renew, grow, launch, and start up small businesses. This slide shows what we expect from our clients. My fellow business advisors want you to succeed, so you'll be assigned homework or further research. So please do the work necessary to succeed. We can't make decisions for you or offer tax or legal advice. We could only connect you to the information you need to make educated decisions. And part of making educated decisions is working with licensed professionals like attorneys or accountants. Next, I want to remind you about some important surveys we send out as part of attending these trainings. Everyone who registered for this webinar received an email from Annalena saying, in anticipation of the upcoming basic steps to starting a business in New Mexico event you have registered for, we would like to collect some preliminary information from you. With this information in hand, we can tailor course material to better fit your needs. An exact quote, you all. So I just want to see by a show of hands, how many of you received and filled out your pre-webinar evaluation or survey? Oh, I'm not liking the results so far, guys. Okay, I'm seeing all more hands now. Okay. If you didn't, please check your spam or your junk box, because it has a tendency to go there. And expect a survey after this presentation to rate the presentation. I'd appreciate if you do both, and it's also a requirement from our funders, the SBA. And if you didn't get yours, be sure to check that junk box. Very good. Now let's talk about starting a business in New Mexico. Before going into business, there are some important things you must consider. Will you make enough money to live? Will this replace your current income? Do you need the benefits offered by your current employer, like retirement plans, medical insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, disability insurance, life insurance, or other important benefits? Can you replace those benefits by starting your business? That's a question you have to ask yourself. You must also think about your educational background and skills. Do you have the correct educational background and skills to understand and operate the many facets of a business? And this includes bookkeeping, accounting, human resources, supply chain management, which is causing most of our goods to go up in cost, sales, and that's just to name a few. If not, you might need to hire somebody to perform these tasks, or you might need to seek out some training to perform them yourselves. And just to gauge your potential as an entrepreneur, we have this Test Your Potential as an Entrepreneur document. Let's see if it wants to be nice and open up from the slides for me. It doesn't, so I'm going to share the follow-up email. And now everybody knows why I send the links in the follow-up email, because they tend not to open in the slide form. Let me make sure everybody is seeing the document that we're going to talk about. Can you raise your hand for me if you're seeing the document called Test Your Potential as an Entrepreneur? Okay, very good. Thank you all. If you're not seeing it, you could chat over what you are seeing. I'd love to know. So here's the document, Test Your Potential as an Entrepreneur. It's first part of it is a way you could gauge your skills, and you could share this with your business advisor, and they could help you. They could help point you towards some great educational resources for you, or maybe these are topics you don't want to learn, and that could be a topic you could outsource or hire somebody to do. I guess you can't hire anybody to have an initiative for you, right? Got to do that yourself. Next are the myths and misconceptions of being an entrepreneur. Then we have some information about identifying startup ideas. And I could give you some insights about that too during this presentation. Then we have some insights about doing a feasibility analysis. And this is, I like doing research in small business. So this is one of the things I like to do. And I'll show you some resources for that later in the slides. Then we have some estimating the cost of a startup, personal living costs. If you are going to apply for a small business loan, they often ask you for your personal living expenses or costs and any income coming into the home. Estimated business operating expenses. And here at the SBDC, we actually have a special software for creating these financial projections. This is a good starting point, but the software we have, it's called the South Dakota model. It allows us to enter maybe a year's worth of income and expenses, and it creates cash flow, balance sheet, break-even points for us. It's a really great software. So if you're going to do anything with the SBDC, take advantage of that for sure. A recap of the costs, and then of course the document on which this webinar is based, the basic steps to starting a business. And then on the back of that sheet is our contact information for agencies you may need to contact when starting a business. And then there's a business plan outline. In that follow-up email, I also include the business plan I like to use. It's the SBDC at UNM Valencia business plan template. And it goes into all the aspects of what you need to research before starting your business. It has 10 steps. It's about 22 pages long, 25 pages to be exact. And at the very end of this business plan are the items you typically need to collect when applying for a business loan. Whether or not you're going to get a loan, I recommend doing a business plan because it puts all your ideas into one place. And eventually you'll have to apply for funding or of some sort. And it's great to have a business plan ready to do that. A follow-up email. Okay, let me share the slides. Perfect. Okay, step one. Now let's go through the steps step by step. And again, these slides will be emailed to you, so don't worry about writing down any of the web addresses because I have those all in the follow-up email. Step 1 is defining the business. This is the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And these questions are answered in a business plan. And if you need a small business loan, you definitely have to provide the lender with a business plan. Many centers use a fill in the blank template, and I put that in the follow-up email, but there are many options for creating a business plan. There's online software like LivePlan. The Small Business Administration has a great website with a lot of trainings, and one of the best trainings they have is writing a business plan. And there are more tools available to you on our website, nmsbdc.org. Also want to point you towards the New Mexico Economic Development Department one-stop website for starting a business. That's gonm.biz. And this website is a partnership between all of the state agencies you need to contact when starting a business. And I will open that up and go over some of the programs for. And I mentioned the SBA's Learning Center. I'll show you that a little bit later, but that's a great resource. And we tried to open gonm.biz from the slides. So this is what the New Mexico Economic Development Department website looks like. The part that most concerns me today is under business resources and EDD programs for small business. And then I like to, you could go over all of the programs available to you. The programs I want to cover are under finance development. And the first program I want to go over with you is LIDA, or the Local Economic Development Act. And what this is an act that allows the state of New Mexico to put aside a pot of money, and then the state of New Mexico can use the pot of money to award to municipalities for bringing in or expanding small businesses in that area. And they have some criteria, and let's talk about that a bit. The business has to have a significant community impact and support, be in a rural and underserved area in New Mexico, which is most of New Mexico. Have increased wages and job creation. That's the main goal of this program, is to have create jobs with good wages. The business has to have a significant new capital investment, and they prefer environmentally sustainable outcomes. A qualifying entity is an industry for the manufacturing, processing, or assembling of agricultural or manufactured products. A commercial enterprise for storing, warehousing, distributing, or selling products of agricultural, mining, or having been manufactured, or an economic-based employer. I don't like the definition they give here. The definition is which is defined as an employer who is deemed eligible for in-plant training assistance by the Economic Development Department's Job Training Incentive Program. Most of the businesses that qualify for JTIP or Job Training Incentive Program funds are manufacturers. But what an economic-based employer is an employer that brings up most of their money from outside of New Mexico. So keep that in mind. Non-qualifying entities, that's usually service businesses or retail businesses. But they may, if you're in a real rural underserved area of New Mexico, say you want to start a small retail or service business in Mountain Air, New Mexico, then they might consider the business. And it goes into the program application requirements. But I want to let you know this is a reimbursement-based program. So you have to come up with the money to create this business, and they will reimburse you based on the application you submit. Excuse me, let me clear my throat. I'm going to put you on mute a second. Okay, there we go. Sorry, my allergies are kicking in. So that's the LIDA program. Next, I want to talk about the collateral assistance program. This program has less strict criteria. And if you are applying for a loan, and you could go through these lenders, these are the lenders that work with the collateral assistance program. And you're applying for a loan, but you have a collateral gap. This program could help you out. The state of New Mexico takes out whatever financial instrument it is that they use. And they provide that guarantee on the loan of that collateral gap. Let's look at some of the banks enrolled. These banks seem like the most willing to lend to a startup business. But if you are a startup business, you might want to consider the nonprofit lenders like the Loan Fund. There's DreamSpring, they're an alternative lender, and West is the Women's Business Center. They could give out microloans under 50,000. I think they go up to about 3 million. And they'll consider startups. So that's the CAP program. And then I want to talk to you about opportunity zones. What opportunity zones are, they are areas designated as low income, high outcome zones in New Mexico. I like to zoom into the map in Los Lunas because that's where I'm located. And most of the west side of Valencia County is in an opportunity zone. What that means is if you want to purchase land or a building or both in this zone and create a small business, you could apply for funding through an opportunity fund. And I'll chat over this link because I didn't include it in the follow-up email. Here's a listing of the different opportunity funds. Let me chat this over. And this NCSHA is the best resource that I found for finding opportunity funds. I haven't found a better resource yet. And if you want to, you could go for a geographic focus. Maybe you want to do nationwide because there are only 2 in New Mexico, which I'll show you New Mexico. There are 2 opportunity zones that concentrate in New Mexico, and they tell you what their investment focus is. You may have to go nationwide. And if your business falls into one of their investment focused categories, they could provide you with funding. I think it's about 80% of the funding that you need to purchase property and make a building on that property. I haven't heard of too many small businesses getting opportunity funds. So if you're interested in that, please take advantage of the program. And they have lots of money, and these fund brokers, they have to make investments in opportunity zones, or else the tax benefit to the investors isn't there. And what the tax benefit is investors could invest the amount of money they would pay in capital gains taxes into an opportunity fund, and they could defer that payment until they sell their investment in that fund. And if they keep that investment for 10 years, they don't have to pay capital gains until they sell that investment. So that's a great federal program to entice small businesses and create funding opportunities for them. That's what I wanted to talk to you about with the EDD. Step 2 is to choose a business name, and there are legal considerations when choosing a business name, and it's very important to find a name that resonates with your target market, looks good on websites, social media, business cards, and other marketing material, is easy to spell and pronounce, and isn't trademarked or copywritten by another business. Let me give you a good example and a tasty example. There was a restaurant in Albuquerque called Dee's Cheesecake Factory, and if you grew up in Albuquerque, it was probably one of your favorite places for lunch or a sweet treat. The owners of Dee's Cheesecake Factory started the business after World War II and trademarked the name in the state of New Mexico. Fast forward to about 2010, there's a national chain called The Cheesecake Factory that wants to do business in New Mexico, but they can't operate a restaurant with Cheesecake Factory in the name because the savvy business owners at Dee's reserved the business name many years before. In this example, the small business had the upper hand, but you could imagine how a small business operating under a trademark business name could end up being sued, have to change their business name and all that expensive marketing material, or they might actually have to shut down the business. There are 2 types of trademarks, state and federal. The first website on the screen is for the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and the second is for the New Mexico Secretary of State's office. The New Mexico Secretary of State's office does the state trademarks. Of course, the United States Patent and Trademark Office does the federal trademark. Perfect. And these are the two agencies responsible for trademarks, of course. There's a lot of great information about federal trademarks on the website, so take advantage of that information. And my advice to you is to consult with an attorney before making a decision on a business name. And we have a new program with the SBDC. It's called the Technology Commercialization Accelerator at New Mexico Tech. And the person who runs that, her name is Stefanita Rawlings. She provides consulting on intellectual property. She could help you look up trademarks on the United States Patent and Trademark Office to make sure you don't infringe on any. Step 3 is choosing and registering your legal structure. The legal structure of your business is its foundation. You must carefully consider how you wish to legally operate your business, and the common business structures are on the slide. Everything but sole proprietorships must be registered with the New Mexico Secretary of State's office, sole proprietorships and partnerships. And the paperwork is available solely online now. And more information about legal structures can be found in the document called Basics of Choosing a Business Entity. And let me open up that follow-up email and I'll show it to you. Here's the follow-up email. And here's the basics of choosing a business entity. The page cannot be found. So let me find that for you. How to choose a business entity. The name just changed a bit. And I'm going to chat over that link to everybody on the call right now. And this is what the document looks like. Goes over the different laws under which you're governed as a small business owner. And then it goes over the different advantages and disadvantages of each of the types of business structures. Again, it's put together by an attorney. Attorneys can answer those legal questions for you. And we could just guide you towards maybe the paperwork requirements for setting up one of these business structures. Okay, let's go back to our slides. And now that we're having fun talking about paperwork requirements, let's talk about step 4, obtaining your federal employer identification number. This is the unique identification number issued to your business by the IRS and is used on all federal filings. And if you're a sole proprietor, your social security number is commonly used instead of an EIN, but you're welcome to get an EIN too. And it's a good idea, especially if you want to open up a bank account at any of the banks or credit unions in New Mexico. And I want to remind you all, this number is just as important as your social security number, and it should be protected as such. A lot of fraud happens with EIN numbers. And no matter what business entity you choose, it's a good idea to obtain this number because you could often use it instead of your social security number when opening up different types of accounts. It's easy to apply for. It's a step-by-step questionnaire. It's free to apply for. And the IRS has a lot of information about it. They actually have a great website. It's on the follow-up email. It's called the IRS Self-Employed and Small Business Tax Center. And they have tons of information about EINs. Do I need an EIN? What happens if I lose my EIN? And again, the people at the SBDC, the staff here, could walk you through filling out that paperwork. Continuing again with our paperwork requirement, step 5 is to register with the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department to obtain, instead, they don't call it a CRS ID anymore, they call it a BTIN, a Business Taxpayer Identification Number. You might be wondering what a BTIN is for and why you need it. Well, It's a unique identifying number used by the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department to record and track your business's collection and payment of gross receipts tax. Oof. If gross receipts tax is a new term for you, you might recognize it as the tax you pay whenever you buy goods or services in New Mexico. It usually shows up at the bottom of your receipt, and it's around 8% depending on where you buy goods or services. The online registration form is free to complete, but you may want to seek the advice of a certified public accountant or bookkeeper when completing the application, especially if you don't plan to file the gross receipts tax reports yourself. It's free to complete the form again. You might, and then you must file your gross receipts tax reports on a monthly, quarterly, bi-yearly, or seasonal schedule. Therefore, the department offers great trainings, and those trainings are available to you here. Let me see if they open up on my slideshow. They do. Make sure I'm sharing them. So there's the direct link to the trainings available from the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department. The gross receipts tax is covered in the new business workshop. And if you click the register now, they have different dates where they offer. Let's see, the next one is May 3rd. I wonder if the presentation is on demand. The presentation is on demand for you, but the webinar, you have to register for the webinar. I'm sorry, I closed it. Let's see. Make sure I'm sharing the correct thing. Perfect. They have the new employers workshop. If you're going to have employees, you need to take out state and federal withholdings from their paychecks, and they go over that in the new employers workshop. And if you're going to, and they also have a bonus webinar where they had somebody, an accountant, talk about the requirements from the IRS for taxes. So take advantage of that free training. Everybody on the call wanting to start a small business needs to take this training. No buts about it. Okay. Step 6 is to obtain your local business license and other applicable licenses. When doing business in New Mexico, you need a license in the municipality or county where you have a physical presence. For instance, Teofilo's restaurant has a physical presence. They would have to obtain a temporary or full business license in the city of Belen and the village of Los Lunas. Some of you might be thinking that you'll do business online or in another state. This means getting a business license in any place where you will physically conduct commerce. If you talk about this in tax terms, they talk about this as a tax nexus. Each municipality or county has different requirements for obtaining a business license. So check with the municipality or county office or consult an attorney for further advice. And for instance, Rio Communities asks you to sketch a floor plan of your business. Even if you're doing a small business out of the home, they want you to sketch a floor plan of where you're going to operate your business. And the city or the Socorro County doesn't have a formal business licensing process. They just ask that you obtain your BTIN or your gross receipts tax ID number before you go into business. And I think that's pretty neat. Step 7 is to report new hires to the New Mexico directory. The link to the directory is on the slide, but this brings human resource considerations into light. Human resources is a very important part of any business and comes with many legal and accounting considerations. You can always contact an accountant or an attorney or both for specific information, but I included links to 2 good resources for learning more about employment procedures and laws. The first link is for Comply Right. They are a sponsor of our America Small Business Development Center conference that we have every year. But they have a free, and they are for-profit service. They offer, HR solutions, but they have a great learning center with e-guides. They have webinars that you could watch on demand. And they have Am I Right videos. These are pretty hokey pokey funny videos. But their webinars and their information sheets are top notch. They give you the information you need to make an educated decision. Do I need to hire somebody to do this? Or can I do it myself? So that's Comply Right. Next is for the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Let me make sure I'm sharing that. Yeah. So the EEOC investigates claims of discrimination based on what the protected classes. So if you are employing, if somebody makes a complaint against you, maybe you didn't hire them because of their race, creed, color, sexual orientation, whatever, the EEOC will investigate. And before you get investigated or before you break a law, because ignorance of the law is not a defense, you should just visit their website, and they have small business requirements, tips for small businesses, EEOC resources, small business fact sheets. Take advantage of that free information before you have to hire a lawyer to defend you against a mistake. So that's free and online, available to you. Oh, let me go back one slide and address this question before I go on. Step 7, okay. Heather asks, on slide 16, does new hires include the owner? That's a good question, Heather. That would depend on what your business structure is. If you are a sole proprietor, you don't pay yourself and take withholdings. You pay self-employment tax at the end of the year on your profit from the business. If you are an S Corp or a corporation, you have or an LLC, you have the opportunity to pay yourself a wage, and you could be an employee of the business. And keeping with the HR trend, step 8 is if you have employees, you may need to complete Form ES 802. This is a required form for the New Mexico Department of Workforce Solutions or Connections. And the Department of Workforce Solutions has many tax services and credits available to you, and learning opportunities for small business owners. So I included their business outreach website on the slide. You have to file that form for new hires, and then you have to pay their unemployment insurance. And they have guides on their website. I'm going to open up their website now. So my links are behaving. You guys are good luck today in my webinar. And then, of course, there's the what you should know about unemployment insurance and the employer handbook. Then they have the hiring incentives. What they do really well is they have they put the job ads out for people looking for a job. The hiring incentives, there's some incentives, like if you hire a veteran, you can apply for a tax credit. That means you don't have to pay the withholdings or up to a certain point. They have a job description writer. That's really cool. And then they have other programs, like they have a work education program. So maybe if you're a truck driver, you want to hire some truck drivers. You know somebody you want to work for you, they don't have their CDL. You could send them to the Department of Workforce Solutions and they may qualify for that work training program. And then they have internship opportunities. They often hire, work with YDI and bring in underserved youth and adults. And they will pay their wages to work for you, and in exchange, you'll teach them job skills. So that's a pretty good one. Yeah, take advantage of that Department of Workforce Solutions. And in some cases, they might even provide space to conduct interviews at the Department of Workforce Solutions, and they do pre-employment screenings like typing tests. Those might be passe. I remember when I applied for a job out of college, I had to do a typing test and a filing test. I think I failed the filing test horribly. Step 9 is if you have employees, seek the assistance of an accountant. You can see all the tax acronyms on the screen like SUTA, FUTA, FIT, SIT, FICA. And if you aren't willing or able to deal with them, please seek out the help from a bookkeeper and accountant. They also have payroll services that you could buy a la carte or with a bookkeeper or accountant firm. The IRS website also has a wealth of information about your federal tax obligations, and I included a link to the IRS Small Businesses Taxes webinar. They have a tax webinar, and if you're not gonna have employees, here's what it looks like. You could get away with the first 4 lessons, but if you are gonna have employees, you should watch all 8 lessons. And this goes over everything you never wanted to know about your federal tax obligation as a small business owner. They also have let me show that follow-up email. They have the Self-Employed and Small Business Tax Center. I don't have it on the slide. Let me get that for you. So I just Google IRS Self-Employed and Small Business. I did good on the typing test. Okay. They have the Small Business and Self-Employed Tax Center. This is what it looks like. I'm going to chat over this resource to everybody on the call right now. This is a great resource. Bookmark it in your browser. And if you have any questions related to operating a business tax-wise, they have the answer for you here. And take advantage of that resource. Okay, perfect. Step 10 is to seek the assistance of an attorney. And we talked about the important legal landmines in starting and operating a business, and attorneys are licensed to answer those questions. For patents and trademarks, there are 3 resources for you. The New Mexico Technology Commercialization Accelerator and the New Mexico State University Patent and Trademark Library. They can't give you legal advice, but they could help you research that information you need before you make a decision about it. Let me show you the TCA. And I believe I have their information in the last part of the slide, but I'll chat it over to everybody now in case you want it. So here's the Technology Commercialization Accelerator. They're actually doing a webinar on the 26th called World IP Day, World Intellectual Property Day. And they're going to have speakers from New Mexico FAST, which is NMSU Technology Commercialization Accelerator type program, and the United States Patent and Trademark Service. So if you want to attend that, it's on our website. And then there's the NMSU. The New Mexico State University Patent and Trademark Resource Center. It's staffed by David Irvin. David Irvin is a wealth of information, and he could help you find that information related to intellectual property on the databases. The databases are hard to use, and you have people like Estefanita, David Irvin, and me to help you navigate those databases. Then I have on the slide the New Mexico Attorney Directory. Let me show you that on the follow-up email. Okay. I like to view it as a web page. And you could chat over to me if I'm making you sick with my clicking and scrolling. So the New Mexico Bar Association is now the State Bar of New Mexico. Here's the link to it. Let's see if it goes. Yeah, it redirects you to sbnm.org. And under For the Public, I need a lawyer. They have the online bar directory. I'll give you tips on how to use it. I don't like to use, I'm not looking for anybody specific in this case. I like to use just 2 sections of it, practice areas. And that can include business and corporations. Other ones you might use are, let's see, estate planning for business owners. That's a good one. Insurance defense, intellectual property, patent entertainment, labor, employment. Taxation. Those are some of the categories you might need in an attorney. And then practice counties. I'm in Valencia County, so we'll use Valencia County. And I don't mess with all the other options. And you see there's 49 attorneys that practice business law in Valencia County. Not all, and it tells you the last one is county. Not all of them are located in Valencia County. Most of them are not located in Valencia County, as you can see. So keep that in mind. And when you click on one, we'll pick one by random. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. It will give you more information about this person. What's their email address? What firm do they work for? What's their phone number? And what are all of their practice areas? Oh, this one's kind of cool. This one does probate, probate and business. Interesting. So that's the state bar database for you. I hope that could help you if you ever need an attorney. Get rid of some of these resources. And let's go back to our slides. Let me make sure you're seeing the slides. Yeah, you should be. And then let's go advance. Okay, we're almost to step 13. There are 13 steps. So step 11 is to review the guidelines for compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. This is a major legal landmine for small businesses, especially those with employees or that have a storefront. So this should be carefully considered. And they have many resources on their website to help you. There are actually people who make a living suing small businesses based on ADA compliance. It's important for you to be ADA compliant to be accessible to those with disabilities. And it's also, important for you not to get sued by somebody. So those are 2 very important things. And if you look on their website, they have a primer for small business and a PDF. And this goes over everything you need to know about being compliant with the Americans for Disabilities Act. There's also consultants who work in that industry. And of course, attorneys could give you advice on that as well. Step 12 is to establish a business bank account. It's best practice to keep your personal and business finances separate. And this makes your bookkeeping process easier. And it'll help you if your business ever experiences an audit. There are lots of different kinds of audits: gross receipts tax audit, federal tax audit, state tax audit. So make sure you're keeping your finances very well. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or the FDIC, has a great learning module for small business owners called FDIC Money Smart for Small Businesses. And I recommend everybody on the call take advantage of that curriculum. Let me open it up. And they have different modules on different topics, but if you take only one, take the one on banking services available for small businesses, because they are different than our personal banking services. So make sure you know the difference and make sure you pick a bank or credit union or financial institution that meets your needs. I suggest taking all of this program, I really do. Okay, our final step, step 13, is have adequate business insurance coverage. This slide shows the common types of insurance coverage, and I recommend you research your options with an independent insurance broker. Oftentimes, independent insurance brokers sell insurance for many different companies and tend to be less biased. They also tend to be small business owners. You could learn more about business insurance by visiting the link on the bottom of the slide. It's for the Hitchcock's Insurance Company's blog. Hitchcock's is a for-profit insurance company. They're one of the oldest and largest small business insurers. They've been around since the time of Spanish galleons and whatnot. And in full disclosure, they do sponsor our Small Business Development Center annual conference. And And if you click that link on the bottom of the slide, of course, the link doesn't want to work for me when I'm talking about it. I will open up the follow-up email for you. And they have the Hitchcock's Insurance Learning Center should be on the last link there. They have a website just for the SBDC and our clients. And if you do or want to learn more about insurance, they have 3 great videos for you. What is small business insurance? What is general liability insurance? And what is professional liability insurance? And then they have different guides. Again, you don't have to buy insurance through them. Take advantage of the free learning opportunities available to you. Let me get my Zoom controls out of the way here. Okay. Whew. Let's take a breather now that we went through all 13 steps to starting a business. I'm going to open up the Q&A and see if there's anything that I want to answer before I show you our research tools. Heather asks, slide 21, if you are a sole proprietor, is it enough to have a separate account to hold business funds, even if it's not a business bank account? I think that should be sufficient, Heather. You would want to, of course, you want to consult with a bookkeeper or an accountant on that one, but I think that should be sufficient enough for you. If you are able to open up an account in the bank account in the business name, I think that would even be better. And often those types of bank accounts give you the financial history you need to get credit lines or business loans later down the road, and that might help you in the future. And Tommy asks, these slides are if the slides will be emailed to everybody. They are in the follow-up email. I did see that some people might have joined after I sent the link, so I'm going to copy this link. This is the follow-up email that I'm showing on the slide, and it does have a PDF of the slides somewhere in here. Webinar slides, second one. So let me open up the chat. I'm going to chat that out again. And I hope to email it if I remember, but I want to give you that link so you have access to it right away. So those were some of the questions. Let's see, maybe I got. Is the state of New Mexico allowing cryptocurrency as a means of paying employees? That is a good question, Natalie. I would have to refer you to the New Mexico Secretary of State's office or the Department of Workforce Solutions on that one. I have not heard anything about cryptocurrency as a way to pay employees, but that's interesting. And I got a question. This person sees that the class is being recorded. Will the recording of the class be sent out after? I'm not going to send it out to everybody, but if you visit our website, www.nmsbdc.org, let's see, and you go to the workshops and events page, and then click here for a list of workshops. And then we have some options at the top of the screen, all on demand or live. If you go to on demand, you'll see the recording of this webinar when it's available. I would imagine it'd be available in a few days. And then if you go to our YouTube channel, I have to Google it each time, YouTube NMSBDC.
American.
You could go to all our playlists or all our videos. And then I'm going to go to the playlist business planning. Oh, there's me. There's basic steps to starting a business right here.
Sell products on Facebook and Instagram.
And I could chat out that recording. It's an older recording, but Annalena Speck, who coordinates these webinars, she does a great job updating these recordings. I'm interested to see when I do this recording. Wow, okay. I don't change up the webinar very much, do I? And then let's see, thank you. Oh, well, thank you. Chris, is credit rating a major factor when applying for a business loan or for business loan assistance? Yes, it is, Michael, because most of the assistance like SBA loan guarantee, the collateral assistance program, they don't lend directly. You have to work with a lender. And usually before you could work with a lender, you have to have a credit rating that's desirable to a lender. And our non-for-profit lenders like the Loan Fund, Dream Spring, West, they will entertain loans for people with credit ratings maybe under 600, but you can't apply for very much funding without a good credit score. That's a great question. Okay, let me talk about the research tools so I could leave some time for Q&A. These data tools are very, very important to the success of your business because they help you fill in your business plan, make informed decisions, and plan for the future. Remember, your business is a big investment, so treat it as such. And the first link is a great 30-minute webinar from the SBA Small Business Administration on how to write a business plan. They also provide great worksheets and examples of financial projections. The second link is for bplans.com by Palo Alto Software. This website provides you with numerous business plan examples, and they used to sell it back in the day on a CD-ROM for like $300. Now they're all available for free online, so take advantage of that. The third link is for Census Business Builder. This is an awesome database from the census, and it allows you to find demographic information about your customers, census stats about businesses in your industry, and estimates of yearly household expenditures in certain categories. And the last link for the last free link, that's 1 through 4, is for the Middle Rio Grande Council of Governments interactive traffic counts map. It allows you to enter an address and see what the average weekday and average weekly traffic counts for a stretch of road are. If you're not in the Middle Rio Grande Council of Governments, you might be in Northeast New Mexico, Southeast New Mexico. They still have a Council of Governments. They may not have an interactive map, but they do release the information in reports. So I want to demonstrate Census Business Builder for you because it's such a great tool. I have to show it to you. And there's two types. There's the small business edition and there's the regional analyst edition. If you're in a big city with multiple zip codes like Albuquerque, Santa Fe, the regional analyst edition would be the best bet for you. I'm going to show everybody the small business edition because most of us are in other parts of New Mexico. This database is organized by NAICS codes or NAICS codes. If you need information about your NAICS code, please contact your SBDC. We have to put those in your client record when you become a client, so they'll definitely know what that code is. If you're in one of the more common industries, they have the quick buttons here. So let's use restaurants as an example today, because there's a lot of information about restaurants. And if anybody wants to chat, the first person to chat me a place, I'll use that place as an example. Gallup. Tommy Wan with Gallup. We'll use Gallup. So, but let me tell you, before I go to Gallup, you could search based on state, metro area, county, city or town, or zip code. But we're going to use Gallup in this example. And you have to wait until it gives you the drop-down menu. And then you could do Gallup, New Mexico micro area, or you could do the city. And I think you want to go with city in this case. And then there's two options for you. You could either go to a map and you could explore different factors on a map. that's a little bit complicated for me and it overloads my home computer. I don't have as great internet service as I do at work. I like to create the report. So here's what the report looks like. And here's that demographic information about people in Gallup. Let's see the total population. Gosh, Gallup has gotten large since I was a kid. 21,154 people in Gallup, bigger than Los Lunas. I didn't know that. Gives you percent male, percent female. I guess it's good to be a male in Gallup, the more women than men there. It gives you some socioeconomic characteristics. So the median household income in Gallup is 48,065. That's a great indicator right there, especially if you want to start a small business. And my rule of thumb is if you want to start something in retail or restaurant, a restaurant or retail type business, it's great to go into a place that has a median household income at or above the national average. And I think the national average is around 60,000 a year. That's not to say a business won't work in that area. You just might have to do more research about it. Then for our all of my tradespeople on the call, contractors, plumbers, here's the housing characteristics. So the price of a median owner-occupied housing unit is 132,000. That's a great deal for a town like Gallup, actually. The median rent is 735, very reasonable, and the average year that a structure was built is 1975. So if I was a contractor or a plumber or some sort of tradesperson, I'd want to go into a place that had a high home value and an old median year structure was built. So I'm thinking Los Alamos on that one. And if I wanted to start an apartment complex, I would want to see that maybe it's cheaper to rent than to own. We're all hearing on the news, we have a housing shortage, but if it's cheaper to buy than own, it's not a big incentive for people to create an apartment complex there. Here's some information about establishments. Thanks for recommending Gallup. I usually do Belana or Los Lunas, and we don't usually get information about businesses. So the annual payroll per employee in this restaurant business is about 10,500 a year. Total employees in this industry, average payroll per employee, and gives you some great indicators there. And it tells you Gallup versus New Mexico. New Mexico's a little higher overall than Gallup. Average revenue per employer, that's a great thing to know. About what, 9 million? No, about 1 million. And then if you keep going on this consumer spending portion is my favorite part of the report. And let's see, this tells us the average expenditure per household per year. So keep that in mind. And it's divvied up into different categories. The one that always makes me laugh is the dating services. So, oh, you guys spend more in Gallup for dating services per household per year than we do in Los Lunas. That's funny to me. And then there's if I was planning to start a business, say a restaurant that catered to lunch, I'd love to go into a place that had a high household yearly expenditure on lunch out of the home. There's not every category represented in this report, but a lot of the common categories are. Let's see, lodging and trips. Gosh, you guys spend in Gallup. You guys are spenders. And look, what I also think is kind of funny is the median household income is 48,000, but the median household expenditure is 55,000. I guess we're living above our means, at least in Gallup. So that's Census Business Builder. That's free to you, that you could access at any time. Now I'm going to show you the database, some databases that are available to you as SBDC clients. You have to make an appointment with your local SBDC to get access to them. I use the UNM library to get access to them. My favorite is IBIS World. Hardest part is me remembering my password to get into the program. And then the first person to recommend an industry to me, like as you see the things on the bottom, public storage, warehousing, campgrounds, online perfume and cosmetic sales. So chat me over a category and I will look up the first category I see. Ice machines. I don't know, that might be too specific, Crystal, but I'll try it. That falls under ice manufacturing. Bet you didn't know there was a whole category in ice manufacturing. So let me show you what one of these reports looks like. So I want to manufacture ice, but before I invest all my life savings into this, I want to make sure that this is a good industry to get into. So what drives this industry? Demand from grocery wholesaling. The ice machines, that's a heavy category. I might not be able to give you that in ice manufacturing. Let me see. Ice making machine manufacturing. Crystal, give me a different category. Give me a broader category than ice machines. I'm going to go with Chelsea. Chelsea gave me wine. And I'm guessing we're talking about making wine. I know, Crystal, you were referring to the ice, like you put money in and you could get ice. That one, a lot of people ask me about those, and it's hard for me to find it. I found that report once, but I think it's outdated by now. But wineries is a good one. That's a broad topic, so we'll look at wineries. And most of these reports are really good and up to date. So let's see what drives the wine consumption stress. Okay, per capita expenditure on alcohol, consumer spending, excise tax on wine, trade weighted index, and regulation for the alcoholic beverage sector. Then it tells us who our suppliers are: sand and gravel, farming wholesale, fruit and nut farming. And then it tells us who our first and second tier buyers are. Important things to know before you start a business. It tells you what those external drivers are doing, at least between 2016 and 2021. And it looks like consumer spending was growing, but everything else was either staying the same or declining. Well, excise tax went down on wine. That's interesting. And it gives you a total revenue in that industry. It's a $20 billion a year industry. Profit in that industry looks like it's going up. It's an upward trend. Profit margin is 7.2%. So that tells me that about 7 cents out of every dollar of revenue goes into the business's profit. And it looks like it's on a growth trend. The number of businesses was increasing as planned to increase 2.7% between 2021 and 2026. That's a good indicator there. Employment in that industry is growing slightly. So are wages. And it tells you the product and service segmentation. So what kind of wine do people like best across the United States? Cabernet Sauvignon. That sounds interesting. And then it gives you the SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Gives you some insights about how it does compared to its drivers. Then it tells you where this industry is at in the business life cycle, and it looks like it's in the decline. That just means more businesses like this will open than close across the United States. Another one of my favorite parts of this is the major markets. So who are the major markets? A lot of people say, I want to start a winery. I have a nice piece of land and I want to sell wine directly to consumers. But look who the major markets are. Wholesalers. So that's, alcohol distributors, supermarkets and grocery stores. So am I able to produce enough wine to supply one of these places? These are my major markets in the United States. Something to think about. So that's IBIS World. And then we have another database called Reference USA. It's now called Data Excel. I'm never going to be able to remember Data Excel. I always like to call it Reference USA. But let me show you how this could help you. So say you are a business that caters to other businesses, or you're looking to fill out your business plan and you want to find businesses like yours, who your competitors are. We could search based on SIC or NAICS codes. And let's do restaurants, because that's an easy one. And we could search based on city or state, metro area, zip code, radius. So a radius from an address, I could do 3 miles from UNM Valencia. I could do county. So let's do county. Let's do Valencia. So there are 78 restaurants. Maybe I create, like our star client in 2017 was Valencia Flour Mill. They just add water mixes for sopapillas and blue corn muffin and pancake mix. And they cater to restaurants, especially Mexican type restaurants. And if they were looking for a list of people they could potentially sell their products to, this could be a great list for them. If I wanted to view where these restaurants were on a map in Valencia County, I could do that. Oh, look, there's one in Laguna. What's in Laguna? Oh, Acoma. There's one restaurant in Acoma. Look, but we could see where the restaurants are concentrated. Probably on the main drags in Los Unos and Belen. What's this restaurant here? Manamart. Oh yeah, they have pizza there. But say I wanted to look for an underserved area of the county, where might I want to put a restaurant in Valencia County that's not being served now? Maybe Tomea. Tomea doesn't look like it's close to any sort of restaurants. The restaurants are all in Los Unos proper. There's some in Los Chavez. Yeah, Leo's. That's C&J's. Oh yes, they have an antique store there too. And then they're all on the main drag in Rio communities or Belen. So look, there's an underserved area. I could see where that is. So that's the business search. Let me go back to the main page and let me show you the consumer and lifestyle search. So maybe you make a product or have a service that you sell directly to consumers and you wanted to maybe mail them a postcard saying I'm open, just like the realtors do a lot of the times. I could search, let's do Gel, New Mexico, and this is going to be interesting. And there's two ways we could search, and in that IBIS report, it usually gives us insights into our market. If we're talking about restaurants, it's usually households with household incomes, estimated home incomes of 100,000 or more. That's the target market. That's the market we want to spend advertising dollars on. And then we have this option to do a lifestyle characteristic. We could search on a lot of these different categories. We're going to use restaurants for an example here. We won't, but like outdoor recreation. If you had maybe you rented out fishing rods. I remember I went to Shady Lakes once. I had to rent a fishing rod. You go to the lake, you forget your fishing rod, huh? You could select those interested in fishing. And this could give you an example. How many of these people are in this area? Would it make sense to start a business in that area? So this would be a restaurant in Joel, New Mexico. Probably doesn't make sense based on the amount of people and that income level there. But if you wanted to start a restaurant there, you wanted to send these people a postcard mailing, you could. You can't call them or email them unless you buy the list, but it's public record to mail out a mailing to them. You could also view them on the map. So these are my wealthier households in Joel, New Mexico. Where are they located? Where would I want to put this full service restaurant in Joel? Probably right on the main drag, right there on what's that, New Mexico 18. Or maybe on 3rd Street. Look, most of our wealthier households are right off 3rd Street. So that's how that could help you. So those are the databases in a nutshell. Let's get back to our slides. I want to leave some time for Q&A. So this is a slide of the resources available to businesses for COVID information about COVID-19. I know it's become a little bit more passé since our numbers have gone down. But especially if you're an employer, want the most up-to-date information, here it is for you. And now that we talked about how we could help you, this is how you could help the SBDC. As part of our offering services, we need your help to ensure services are around for many more years to come. So we ask that you participate in our surveys, report economic impacts because of our assistance to your advisor or director, and write letters of support to your local legislators about your experience with the SBDC. All information is kept confidential and it's only reported in aggregate to our funders, the state of New Mexico and the Small Business Administration. This slide provides information for SBDC programs, PTAC, IBA, and New Mexico Tech TCA. The Procurement Technical Assistance Center is a government-funded program providing assistance to small businesses who want to sell their goods or services to the government, educational institutions, or tribal entities. The International Business Accelerator is a one-stop shop of resources for New Mexican businesses and individuals wishing to introduce their product or service into the global market. And the New Mexico Tech Technology Commercialization Accelerator offers no-cost confidential counseling regarding intellectual property. This slide continues the list of small business resource partners, SCORE, or the Service Corps of Retired Executives, WEST, or the Women's Business Center Program, and VBOC, or the Veterans Business Outreach Center. These are all the programs sponsored in part by the Small Business Administration. And here's the contact information for your small business support team. We are funded by the Small Business Administration, and many people ask about SBA loans. So I put a link to the SBA resource guide. I don't think that guide is available right now. I've talked to the Small Business Administration about it, and they are aware. But if you want to learn more about Small Business Administration loan guarantees, go to sba.gov, not wherever I was going before. I remember I passed the typing test. You could go to funding programs and loans. And the comment, you could find a lender here. They have this, it's called lender match tool, where you could enter your needs, your borrowing needs, and they could connect you with a potential lender. And this is how they work. You work with a lending partner, and the SBA provides a guarantee to reduce the risk of the loan and enable access to capital. The common types of loans people on the call right now would be interested in are probably 7A loans and the micro loans. And it tells you what it's available for. It gives you some of the requirements. I like the resource guide. So if you ever see that the resource guide is available, it has all a listing of all the SBA participating lenders in the state. And that's what I like about it. It's not, we have some physical copies in the office. So if you ever want to visit me and get a physical copy of that SBA resource guide, you are more than welcome to. And this concludes our slideshow. Now I'll take the opportunity to answer any questions. So let's open that Q&A. And Tommy asks, where can we find liquor licenses for sale for certain areas? I don't think I've ever researched where to find liquor licenses available for sale. Let's see if I could find one. Here is more information about obtaining a liquor license. Let me put that in the chat, or let me type an answer, put that in the chat for you, Tommy. I've never seen a directory with a listing of liquor licenses. Looks like they have some websites that have liquor, like brokers for liquor licenses there. BizQuest is an okay one. BizQuest is an okay place to look, actually. I've had a business, people come in looking to purchase a small business, and they've looked on BizQuest, and it seems to be somewhat of a reputable website. So I'll chat that over too. I could give you a hot tip now. The Sheriff's Posse in Belen, they may be interested in selling their liquor license. Keep that in mind. Let me see. Well, I don't really need the slides open to do the Q&A. So I'll just stop sharing, put my face on there. Let me see if there's anything in the chat. Okay, Douglas asks, in my business, I'm planning on having 3D printers. However, all insurance carriers say that this will be killer for them due to copyright issues. How can I get insurance and still have the printer? Douglas, there's no way around that. You're going to have to work with the insurers. Again, I recommend looking for a independent insurance broker, and maybe you don't need insurance. Maybe consulting with an attorney to see if you even need insurance in this business for the 3D printers, or finding another financial instrument to help you mitigate that risk. Okay, so we're a pretty intimate group today. So if you want to raise your hand and ask your question instead of typing it into the Q&A, you're welcome to do so. I know we went over a lot of information today. Well, I'll be here with you until 1 when anybody's ready for a question. Those of you who don't have a question, you're free to leave the webinar. Remember to take that link out for the follow-up email. I plan to send that out as soon as I'm able to, but you have access to it now with that link. Well, thank you, Tommy. Thank you for the thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for spending time with me today. Again, raise your hand if you want to speak. I will stay on with you for at least the next few minutes. If nobody has a question, we could end. Well, thank you, Chelsea. Thank you for the thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sandra. I'll stop the recording. I know some people don't want to ask a question on the recording.